when you put all this together, I see debt growing at a accelerating pace, and I see foreigners dumping our treasuries. They don't want them anymore. And I think treasuries will very soon no longer be the go-to store of value. I think it's moving to precious metals.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for October 30th through November 6th, 2023, while supplies last. This week we feature 3 different specials: 1-ounce Silver Philharmonics at $3.10 over spot, 1-ounce Platinum Kangaroos at $85 over spot, and pre-33 $10 gold Liberties in AU condition at $1.15 over melt. First, the Silver Austrian Philharmonic is one of the most popular bullion coins in Europe, and frequently regarded as one of the most beautiful as well, displaying musical instruments on one side and the famed Great Organ of the Golden Hall on the other, all in 3/9 fine pure silver and made by the 900-year-old Austrian Mint. 2023 Silver Philharmonic is available at just $3.10 over spot. Next, we have the 1-ounce Platinum Kangaroo from the Perth Mint at just $85 over spot. Many consider platinum to be highly undervalued at the moment, since over the last 30 years, platinum has generally been significantly more expensive than gold, but currently sits at less than half the spot price. Best of all, the 1-ounce Platinum Kangaroo is just $85 over spot, giving you access to a premier coin in a premier metal at one of the lowest prices in 20 years. Finally, the Gold Liberty is one of the most famed gold coins in history, a physical reminder of the gold standard and hard currency in the United States. Minted from 1838 through 1907, the $10 Liberty offers just under half a troy ounce of gold in a 90% fine coin. These coins are in AU almost uncirculated condition and available at just $115 over melt, offering a great way to hold American history at a great price. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We are always privileged to have this returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals, and he joins us for this weekly market update. Today is Tuesday, October 31st, 2023. Andy, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Hey, good to see you again, Dunnigan. Always nice to be back.
Our viewers always appreciate your presence here, and I wanted to get your perspective on one phenomenon that I've been observing with increasing frequency from clients who are making a significant move, especially if they've been watching and thinking and pondering and contemplating and educating themselves, and they've really finally crossed that tipping point where they realize that the banks are not a place to be. That is, there is nothing in the banks that belongs to them, that they don't have legal title to anything that they have deposited in the banks. And they're getting the same feeling about their brokerage accounts, that any of the balances they're holding in their brokerage accounts or their stocks that they believe they have legal title to are actually held in other names than their own, etc. And they finally are getting the gut feeling that you've talked about for a long time. Trust your gut and take action before it becomes obvious to the herd. And so they call up and say, I'm ready to load up on metals. And I say, okay, are your funds free and clear? Are you ready to pay for this? And they say, well, I've got to liquidate some stocks or liquidate some mutual funds, or I've got to wait for this CD to mature. I've got to get my custodian for my 401k to do a rollover first and set up my... So the point that seems to be happening is people are reaching that tipping point. They're reaching that critical mass of understanding the risk that they're actually under, and yet not calculating in that there can easily be 1 or 2 or more weeks of work that they need to do to get their funds free and clear before they can make a metals purchase. So that's one thing. Just a heads up to everyone that's the reality. Sometimes their funds are even in cash in their house, and they got to go make a big deposit in the bank and decide whether they want to fill out a form, $8,300, $10,000 cash deposit form, and get the bank manager to tell them whether those funds are going to be immediately available, et cetera, et cetera. So any experienced words from you on that timeline of once you've reached that decision point, you're ready to take action, that there still may be steps ahead before you can actually purchase metals?
I think one of the fallacies that needs to be discussed, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the liquidity of, or the perception of liquidity. You know, we were blessed with the privilege of doing 2 orders last year, both of them north of $50 million. And the first one we did, if you recall, the client wanted us to tell the world about it, which was something that's atypical in this industry that is dominated by privacy and by, that's something you never disclose. Yet the reason she wanted us to talk about it was because it took her over 4 days to get her money released from a bank and had to employ threatening and bringing in the regulators to have that money released. Now, that's not your typical situation, but certainly when you're rolling over an IRA, as an example, could take a week or 2 weeks or longer. And there's no rule about this, but I guess I could say, speaking in general terms, the custodians are very methodical, let's say, in releasing those funds. Can be a lot longer than people would like. And certainly when you talk about selling equities, I think it used to be T+3, and if I'm not mistaken, it's T+2 now, I think. T being the trade day plus 2 days. So you're looking at 3 days before the funds are in your account, certainly. So yeah, one of the things to think about is that, this is the whole reason about being prepared early before it becomes too late. And some of the things that you mentioned, people are waking up to things like bail-ins or waking up to the fragility of the market or the system. And while that's great, I would argue that they have woken up perhaps a good 15, 20 minutes before their peers, the masses. And when their alarm clock goes off, you're too late. There's not enough metal out there. It would just become too clogged and cloudy, and it would end up ruining everything you're trying to do. So yeah, absolutely. When people ask me, let me just say it this way, and it's really a good point. It's worth talking about. When people say to me, I have $100,000, would I be better off buying it all at once or cost averaging? My typical go-to was cost averaging smooths out the uncertainty, and it is a good way to employ it. And over the years, it would have been a good strategy in this very much up and down volatile market. Really, over the years, we've seen all sorts of markets, low, high, and everything in between. But I guess you have to ask yourself, how close are we to that moment where there is an event like a bank bail-in or something else that would trigger a mass awakening? So yeah, I think now more than ever, it's really imperative if you've made that decision to be swift about it. And I'm not trying to say that to hurry people into the turnstile. I'm just simply saying, and again, I'm the little boy who cried wolf. I'm on the new version of the little boy who cried wolf. I'm there waving. I am the one who believes this. I am the one who believes we're living on borrowed time. At least get your core position in order now, before you have the luxury of cost averaging and taking your time and doing things. Until then, I think you're really putting yourself potentially in a compromising position, because one of these days, and I don't know when, but one of these days, the commercial banks and the COMEX will be long and will just run with the price, and they won't short the rising price and screw the managed money like they've done over and over and over and over again for many years. One of these days, the price will just go. And that will coincide with probably mass adoption by the public, realizing that there's nowhere left to hide. That's why it's so important to realize that as we get closer to these events, you're going to find it harder and harder and harder to find liquidity, even in things like money markets, as we've talked about before. Everyone talks about bail-ins, but don't forget, money market gating was implemented at the same time. You have $1 trillion that have crept into money markets over the last 6-8 months. They think it's liquid, daily liquidity. Well, if something happens, bang, you're gated. Sorry, you cannot leave. And we've talked a lot about that on your shows. So being proactive is really the name of the game.
All right. So, folks, I know that our viewers here are intensely interested in knowing the truth and acting in accordance with the truth, and therefore, and being prepared, not waiting till the last minute. And that's the trick, is we never know when the last minute is. So we try to take action proactively ahead of time. That's the whole point of preparedness, is taking action when you can, so that you don't have to be stressed with the crowd when it's too late and everybody else is trying to do it when it's obvious. So folks, don't wait till the last minute. Realize it takes time for these wheels to turn, and start them turning early. If there is any early left to be had, this is probably as good a time as any. All right, Andy, now back to we're zooming way back out to the macro view. My wife and I, around where we take walks here in Florida, we like to see wildlife, and we can never seem to zoom in enough on it and get it pulled in tight enough. We got to get some better, bigger binoculars. We got bald eagles around here and cool stuff we got to get a closer look at. But you help us to also not only zoom in, but to zoom way out and see the big picture. Can you give us your current things that you're watching closely in that big picture, and anything that our viewers need to be appraised of this week on this weekly market update?
Yeah, I have a really hard time zooming in. I have a hard time, my brain just short circuits when I look at things in a very short, in a condensed micro view. I'll tell you, one of the things, at least, and it's not pleasant, one of the things that I worry about a lot in terms of the macro view, everyone's looking at the micro view of these wars, of the Ukraine and the Middle East. And the macro view, what scares the heck out of me is the fact that technology and military, the technology and military, and the technology period at our disposal, to me, is becoming too powerful without some sort of basic agreement for peaceful competition amongst the world's players. I think you have players out there that would very quickly do things that Western civilization would think is incomprehensible. And when we see what's happening around the world, it becomes a scarier and scarier and scarier place. This is one of the reasons I'm blown away that the public hasn't woken up to exactly what's happening, and forget about what we've talked about with the dollar and all of these things. It's a scary thought to think there are countries out there that would do things that the West would never contemplate, and to them it would be something that would be an honor. And I think when we take a look at what's going on here in the United States, it's also very shocking to me. It's almost as if we've chosen violence over being united. And there was a poll, and I'm not sure if we talked about this last week, but it's just blown me away. A poll at the Virginia Center for Politics that said 52% of Biden supporters say that the Republicans are now a threat to the American way of life, and 47% of Trump supporters say the same thing about the Democrats. But even more startling is that 41% of Biden supporters believe violence is justified, and 38% of Trump supporters say the same thing, to embrace violence. And this is something that is spinning out of control in this country. The lawlessness is ridiculous. And a country or a government or a system breaks down without faith. And one of the things that this country always has had is faith in our institutions, in being a united country. And this is what has made us the envy of the world. And without faith in the underlying systems or the constitutional system, we have a system now that is breaking down. And it's concerning me in a very big way. A couple other things to talk about in terms of a bigger picture here. Look, I also feel that from a historical point of view, anyways, that Treasury bonds for savings have been a relatively new concept in terms of history. And I think when you look at what's happened over the last couple of years in the breakdown of the bond market, representing maybe the worst bond market in history over the last 2.5 years, down about 50%, I think we are beginning to see the world, at least the big money, discovered gold as being the preferred safe haven store of value. And I think there's no coincidence in this that we've seen the worst year ever for Treasuries, coinciding with the highest central bank purchases ever. In fact, last year we talked about how the central banks bought more gold than ever. And this year, so far this year, they've bought over 800 tons. That's up 14% year over year from last year. Their trend is accelerating. A couple more things to chat about, and that would be Hirschman Capital is a company that published something, but I've talked about this ad nauseum, and that is they just came out and said, hey, we just crossed 130% debt to GDP. And they say 98% of the countries, I would say 100% of the countries where sovereign debt hits 130% debt to GDP, they've all defaulted on their debt. It's between 98 and 100%. You cross 130, whether it be through outright inflation or outright default, it's a bad, bad thing that we have crossed this bridge, and they continue to accelerate the deficits, and the spending is out of control. Not a good thing. And I think the rest of the world sees this. You don't see 98% very often in anything in finance, and this is something people need to pay attention to. And then I'll just wrap it up by simply saying, look, when you put all this together, I see debt growing at a accelerating pace, and I see foreigners dumping our treasuries. They don't want them anymore. And I think treasuries will very soon no longer be the go-to store of value. I think it's moving to precious metals. And I think you're seeing this from the top on down, from the big central banks, and there will be a realization by the public that this is something that has already been in place now for a few years, using the suppression of the market to run cover for it. We've talked ad nauseum about the central bank purchases, which are accelerating. So don't get on the wrong side of that. Only one thing to mention that I've seen in terms of BRICS this week, and that is that there was a grand opening ceremony for the Yuan Clearing Bank in Pakistan, which here again, they're going all around the world and using mutual cooperation and inclusion to build infrastructure. And you're seeing it everywhere you turn, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in South America or in Africa. And this is a trend that is also accelerating, as is the settling in local currencies until they come to a mutual conclusion for a settlement currency in the BRICS nations. So not a lot of good news to report. And I think it just adds credence to why people should think about being a contrarian, de-dollarizing, and looking at gold and silver as wealth, not as an investment.
You reminded me in that discussion about what is really being considered a true store of wealth going forward by the most informed players in our world. And that is that tomorrow I'm going to be interviewing Carol Roth, the author of the book, You Will Own Nothing. And that's the plan that is being laid out for the next generation and all generations to follow, is that we will be invited to own nothing and be happy about it, which is, if you think about it, when you work and you give up your life for working and you own nothing, that's what slavery is called. So anyway.
That's one of the depressing things I've heard in a long time. I can't wait to see it. And, I'm sure she'll talk about this. You could even ask her. It's interesting. Everyone talks about Klaus Schwab, but I'm going to paraphrase it again, what Thomas Jefferson said 300 years ago. I'm going to get it wrong, but it was something to the extent that if we allow a central bank to control the money supply in this country, first by inflation, now we certainly saw that, more money created in the last 4 years than in the history of the United States preceding. So first by inflation, then by deflation. Now you can argue that's where we're going. The money supply is falling off a cliff. The repo market's being drained. The credit is being drained. This is all very deflationary as debt is going to implode. First by inflation, then by deflation. We'll end up renting the land back that our forefathers conquered. That's another way of saying you'll own nothing, you'll rent, and you'll be happy. It's eerily similar to what Klaus Schwab said. And this is all real stuff. And that's what I love about you and other people who have the courage like you, and I guess maybe me too. I have the courage to say these things that we're not hearing elsewhere. But, like most people, when Klaus Schwab said that in 2019, I thought he was full of bananas. But I don't feel that way anymore. And I think it's becoming more and more of a plausible outcome. So I'll be interested to hear that interview and look forward to checking it out.
Yeah, I learn more from the interviews that I do than just about anything else. And my wife does research to help me have a stream of new guests that we can have on. I appreciate that to no end. And you labor prodigiously every week to try to find a special that you can offer for those who do want to either start or continue their next step of getting into something that's real, something that doesn't depend on the system, something that's outside of the inflationary aspects of the dollar and the fiat and the banks and all that. So what are you able to offer this week for a special for our viewers?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the last few weeks, we're in this environment where, I want to go on record, it makes no sense to me, none, when Ted Butler is saying that there's no product that on the industrial level, that silver is 1,700% hypothecated and gold even more than that in terms of the paper contracts versus the bars backing it. The same environment, mind you, that the Hunt brothers noticed in 1980, and yet it hasn't shown itself. In fact, it's the antithesis of that in this industry. It's eerily quiet, the calm before the storm. Not to say business isn't very strong, it is. But the fact that product availability and premium, I keep saying over and over and over again, in the face of Ted Butler saying it's all disappearing up there and the draining of all of the exchanges up there hasn't trickled down yet down here. Whatever that event is, a bail-in or something worse, God forbid, maybe then people will see what I'm talking about as things change rapidly. But in this environment, I'm going to try to bring as much as I can while we can at real values. And we're going to try to do each week until we can't. 1 platinum, 1 gold, 1 silver. Maybe one of my very favorite gold items for sure. I'll save that for last. But we have the 1 ounce platinum Australian Kangaroo right now at $85 over platinum spot. Platinum's been hard to come by over the last several years. The mints don't make very much. And from a standpoint of price relative to gold, it has a very similar argument as does silver. It just doesn't quite have the industrial footprint that silver does. But I like it, and it should be a small part of your portfolio, but nonetheless, this is a good choice. $85 over spot on 1 ounce Australian Kangaroos. We also have the 2023 Austrian Philharmonic for $3.10 over the price of silver. These are brand new. If you're looking to get some 1 ounce silver coins, these are one of the 6 major mints and as good as it gets. And then in gold, going back to something that if I had my druthers, it would be all I would own, would be the pre-1933 U.S. gold, the $10 and the $20 gold pieces. Now, prior to 2000, that's all anyone bought. The difference in price from a gold bullion coin to a numismatic coin, regardless of the grade, was next to nothing. And so everyone owned it. But really, since the turn of the century, those premiums have diverged so much from spot that I haven't been able to, in good conscience, recommend them very often. Well, here's something where we can find kind of a strike and balance between the principles people find effective in numismatics, namely no dealer reporting buy or sell, and also the safety as per the executive order from confiscation as it being a pre-1933 gold coin. Now, again, it's not the coin that is exempt. It's the motivation that the collector would employ for owning it. The specific exemption of dentists, jewelers, and coin collectors of pre-33 gold. These are the AU grade, meaning almost uncirculated, but they are circulated grade. Raw, not certified, like this coin here being certified. Not like that, but a raw AU grade, very nice condition, $10 Liberty, 1907 or earlier. It's in essence a half ounce. It's just a hair under a half ounce, and it's $115 over its melt value per coin. It's roughly the same price as a half ounce gold eagle. We're real darn close to it. So for my money, if I can buy a piece of Americana 100 plus years old, then that's what I would choose 10 times out of 10 if it's not going to substantially decrease the amount of gold I could otherwise buy by getting bullion. So love these, and they are available. We have a nice supply. Again, 115 over melt. They're just under a half ounce, and those are the 3 specials that I feel really good about this week, being able to bring to you.
Well, Andy, we're always grateful for your presence, not only for the specials, but also just for the insight that you give us and the heart with which you bring that to everyone who watches the channel. I believe is sincere. They're spending their significant amount of their times here. When I watch the 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific not live streams, but premieres that we put up 6 days a week. We see the live chat that's happening during that, and it's a lot of the same people. They're really come to this place. It's kind of like the old series Cheers, where you go to where they know your name. You know, they support each other. We're learning together. We're hanging in there together. They're finally, I'm hearing from so many of them where they had been the black sheep in the family for so long. There are family members and friends and acquaintances and coworkers and neighbors that are coming around and showing curiosity now. So the message is resonating now with people who are starting to get that after 3 years of seeing the stock markets volatile and the bond market down and the real estate rolling over finally. As Rick Rule says from Stansberry Research, it takes approximately 12 exposures of useful information, even in the area where people are interested, before they're likely to take action. So people are starting to take action, and folks, make sure you give yourself enough time to do the plans that you have laid out for your strategic improvement of your situation. Andy, thanks so much for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
You got it, my man. Thanks for having me as the world spins faster and faster and faster, out of control. We'll help do our best to anchor to something stable, and it's always a privilege to be here. So look forward to, God willing, to pick back up where we left off next week. Until then, I hope you and everyone out there stays well and has a great rest of your week.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.